So today, once again, we're going to go over some possible continuation plays in the market. So I've picked out a few stocks that we're going to go over for possible continuations, along with any stock that pops up and hits our scanner for today's pre-market. So the first one I wanted to honestly go over was DRYS, and the only reason I want to take a look at DRYS for everybody is the fact that yesterday it had a huge day. I think it finished out somewhere around 60% on the day, which is a big move. So I can assure you that there are a lot of people watching this stock right now. Is it going to continue to run? I don't think so. So for any of those of you that are still within this stock or still have some shares or a position in the stock, just be very careful coming into today's playing. Now, mind you, alone just on FinViz, DRYS has a float of 5 million, so that gives it an opportunity to move very quick. It can be very volatile. Alone, its short float is 86%. When we say short float, that means 86% of the float is betting the stock is going to go down. 86% of the shareholders within the float are betting the stock is going to go down. Okay, so be very cautious of that. If for whatever reason the stock shows any sort of upward momentum, we will probably see a short squeeze on DRYS today. Okay, so alone in pre-market, it's reached a high of 194. It's kind of found a little bit of support here in pre-market trading, potentially right around the $1.60 area, just above it. It's bounced there a little bit. It's coming down to retest that right now. I'm not positive if it's going to hold up, but we'll see. So far right now we have a high of 194 pre-market, and we have support that's trying to build at the 160 area right now. Will it hold? I don't think so. But for right now, the area of support would be 160. That is where it bounced yesterday in after hours trading. So right now in pre-market, DRYS is trying to hold support based on its bounce in after hours trading yesterday. Okay, so that basically covers it for DRYS. DRYS is one that we can just watch today for fun. If it starts to show signs of upward momentum, keep an eye on it because we could potentially get a huge short squeeze with it, okay? Now, I was going to take a look at TOPS, but I'm no longer going to look at TOPS. It completely got crushed pre-market here. The next one on my radar that I really like is MTBC. If we take a look at MTBC, for those of you following along within the voice chat this morning, MTBC completely killed it towards the end of the day yesterday, ended up moving up from, about the $1.30 area all the way up to closing at a price of 166. So alone we had about a 20% move there. Altogether within the day it was probably somewhere up 30%. Now, it did gap down a little bit pre-market, which I don't like, which does scare me a little bit. But MTBC is a stock that ran up towards the end of the day on pretty good volume. It is now holding, in after hours trading, it did hold its highs of about 173, and it fumbled around in that 170, 160 area. So, continuing that, MTBC held up about the 170, 160 area. Now, it did gap down, and it's sitting at about 157 right now, $1.57. Now, the only thing that I have an issue with this is the fact that it did just gap down. For stocks that are going to continue momentum into the day, we want to see that they're holding their highs, okay? We went over this yesterday. The stock is down a little bit. Not to say that it can't continue running. I guarantee there's a lot of eyes on this stock right now, and a lot of people are watching it because of that run that it made there at the end of the day. Okay, with that being said, alone MTBC was recently, or it has been, in a downward wedge pattern, and just recently, probably yesterday would have been the day, or the start of it would have been maybe 2 days ago, MTBC started to break out of its downward wedge a little bit, and it's starting to show signs of upward momentum. Now, I do believe that we have an earnings call coming out for MTBC tomorrow, I think it is. And if I'm wrong on that, you can correct me, but I do believe we have an earnings call coming out on MTBC tomorrow, so there may be some hype building on that. But alone, MTBC has a 5 million share float. That means that this stock can move very quickly, and as day traders, we want to find stocks with low floats, trading on high volume to give us those moves that we'd like. Now, the float is 5 million. The share or the short float is only 9%. So there is some short interest in MTBC. But not a ton, not like D or YS or anything. So it is possible that you could see a little pop from shorts getting covered, or shorts covering if there is any signs of upward momentum. But the short float is only 9% with the overall 5 million share float altogether. MTBC is starting to break out of a downward wedge. Now, I would have liked to play the break of the pre-market high on this, but we are gapped down and we're sitting right close to the 100 exponential moving average in pre-market trading. So my ideal entry point has now gone away. You could just look to see if it sells off and we get a potential bounce around the 150 area. That could be a next sign of support, just a psychological support. Or the next one would probably be somewhere, I would say 150 would be a strong area for a bounce play, but we don't know until the market opens, obviously, and we pay close attention to the stock. But I would definitely keep MTBC on watch today. It showed super good signs of momentum later in the day. There's probably a lot of people watching it. Not a huge short float interest. And so for MTBC, Brandon, my entry ideally was going to be the break of 173 or the pre-market highs, which was right around 170. So that was going to be like my entry area. That would have been my entry zone if we could see some strong momentum, keep pushing the stock right. But, of course, it didn't want to do that. And now the price is sitting right somewhere in the 159, 160 area. So now that my original entry, now that my original entry is no longer valid, I'm gonna watch the stock and just see how it plays. Starts to play intraday. Now that we've gapped down so far below the pre-market highs, you could end up seeing a little bit of resistance there. If the stock starts to move up, you could see a little bit of resistance at that pre-market high level because we're so far away from it right now. So to be honest with you, I don't have an exact entry point for this one right now. This is something I'm just going to have to keep on watch. Then the last one I wanted to take a look at, just because I know a lot of you guys are very interested. And before I switch over off of MTBC, if any of you guys are looking at a 1 year, 1 day chart, you will notice that MTBC was in a downward, you could call it a downward wedge pattern, or whatever you guys like to call it. But it just broke out from beneath its 50-day moving average. So the 9 exponential is starting to cross the 20 over the 100. So the stock just broke through its 100 and its 50-day moving average. So this stock has room to run, and its next sign of resistance would be around the $2.16 area. So if we're looking in the bigger picture, if you look at the bigger picture of things in the 1 year day chart, the overall resistance we're going to look at, or next level, will be around the $2.16 area for previous price points. But as we all know, $2 is going to be a strong resistance point. So that would be maybe my first target on MTBC today as far as the target price goes. Okay. Now moving on, we're going to take a look at RAD, and we'll make this fairly quick because now we're going to start looking at some of the pre-market movers that are popping up on the scan today. Earlier there wasn't much, but maybe some things have changed since then. Okay, so looking at RAD. And I know the voice may be breaking up. It's kind of going in and out here. I'm trying to keep it at a good level. So like it just connected again. So we'll just have to work with what we got here. Now looking at RAD. RAD made some fairly big moves yesterday. We've seen it move from $2.26 all the way to $2.42 intraday. So along with that, it made a pretty big move. it was trading in a downward channel for a long time, and then it just broke a long time ago when we heard about that merger deal that they were possibly going into. The stock started seeing a lot of momentum, and then it started coming back down. So if you're looking at a one-year day chart, I want you to look very closely that it just had what we would call pretty close to a double bottom. Not the most ideal double bottom, but it did have a little bit of a double bottom. And this is the first green day that we're seeing in, about a month, really. I mean, I would say first green day we're seeing, our first big green day we're seeing in quite some time. Okay, so it just kind of had a double bottom. Is there news on it recently? Today, not really. There hasn't really been any recent news to drive the price up. Maybe it's the fact that it just hit a double bottom, but this is a stock that ran up yesterday and it's holding its highs. So I would look for a break above the previous high of day yesterday. So your potential entry point would be at 242. And obviously I'm not trying to tell people exactly how they should trade, but for me, my ideal entry point would be a break above 242 to see possible continuation on RAD. So right now we're talking about RAD. Can anybody hear me in the chat? Okay. So RAD together has a 1 billion share float. So that's a huge float. Okay. So if you're looking at a 1 billion share float, that's a big share float. So you're not going to get the same volatility that we would on lower, on penny stocks that have 5 million or 10 million or 20 million share floats. Now, what I want to spot out is the short float, though, is only 8%. The short float is very low, so you can't expect to get any short squeeze out of this. But what I'm telling you, though, is that RAD had strong momentum yesterday. It held its highs for majority of the day. So this is one of those stocks that, we just keep on watch because it's held its highs. So now we're going to look for a break above the previous high of day yesterday. In pre-market trading, it's kind of hanging out right there. We're sitting at 239 right now. So we're only 3 cents off the high of day yesterday. So we don't have much room to go before we're hitting that previous high of day. And I want to spot something out to you guys. For those of you that are beginner traders just starting to get into trading stocks, or even whether you're experienced, RAD has a 1 billion share float. It is not a super volatile stock. It is not going to move super dramatically. It can make big moves, yes, but it's not going to make those moves where it goes up 30 cents and then it drops down 30 cents. That's not the type of movement we're most likely going to see on RAD. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to move into some pre-market scans and see if we can't pick up anything appealing today. So far, there are a few things that we're picking up pre-market. So the first one we're picking up is RWLK on my scan, and that is something that somebody just mentioned out in the chat not long ago, was RWLK. Now, the first thing we do when we're going over stocks pre-market is, first off, we want to see why on earth are they even moving, right? So the first thing we need to do is, before we even look at any sort of support or resistance, we kind of want to look at whether or not the stock has any news, recent news. Is the stock running on news? Does it have a catalyst? So far with RWLK, this thing does not have any really recent news. I mean, sort of on the 25th, it had some news. So no, not really. Doesn't have any recent news, so I don't feel the stock is running up based on that news. This is simply just running up based on technical trading, or the fact that there was enough shares to come through to push up the price just a little bit in pre-market trading. What else do we have here? So taking a further look at RWLK, it is the leading gapper in the morning right now, and it's only trading on not the heaviest volume. Okay, so it's gapped up to 165. It hasn't held that high of 165, so this isn't going to be like gap and go right out of the gates. You could say that it might be forming a little bit of a flag pattern coming out of here. But, you know, long story short, if I were to play this, I would have to get a break above 165 intraday. Other than that, I'm not really liking the way that it's set up right now, and that's just me, okay? You could see this thing end up coming out of the gates and dropping like a rock, and then it might find some support right around the 130 area, which was where it ended out yesterday. Yesterday, it kind of consolidated sideways. So I'd say a good area of support would be right around the 130. So if this does tend to drop, we could see a bounce around that 130 area. Now, and that's another thing. So a 5-cent tick, I'm glad somebody mentioned that out. Jay Blue on the chat here, right? So it is a 5-cent spread, okay? So for those of you who are very beginner traders or haven't been trading for very well or don't ever pay attention to level 2, you should start, because right now on RWLK it has a 5-cent spread. So what that means is, for example, if you put in a market order, let's say you put in a market order, your market order is going to go through and you're going to get charged $1.55 a share when the bid is only $1.50. So if you get charged $1.55 a share and you go in to put a market order again to sell, right off rip, you're losing 5 cents a share because you're going to get sold on the bid, but you're going to buy on the ask. So you have a 5-cent spread. So always be careful when you're looking at stocks and watch their spread. The spread is the difference between the bid and the ask. Okay, so real quick here, we got about 8 minutes till market opens. Our next one we can take a look at is CLSN very quickly. So CLSN is gapping up, yes, a little bit. It's kind of choppy. So it looks like CLSN does have some news out this morning, and that could be why that we're running up. And it does seem to be fairly good news. Just the headline alone says, announces latest translational data from the ovation study in newly diagnosed ovarian cancer patients. Okay, so anytime you see diagnosed advanced cancer, a study, newly, latest, announcement, something along those lines usually represents good news. And you can go ahead and you can do some further digging and read into that, but I'm not. That's a lot of reading in a short amount of period of time. So what we do know is that CLSN is moving up based on news. This is a stock pre-market that's moving on news, and that's usually a better stock to watch than a stock gapping up pre-market with no news. We want to pay attention to the stocks with news because we have a better opportunity of making money. Okay, so right now we're sitting at about $1.91. The high pre-market is $2. I am the type of trader that loves to trade the break of the pre-market high, but we're 8 cents off that right now, so it is kind of far away. So the ideal entry point for me is a break above the pre-market highs, yes, and that is right at $2. So if I'm going to play the stock, I'm going to play CLSN for a break of pre-market high, and the fact that pre-market high is sitting right at $2, which is a super strong resistance point. So I'm not going to want to get in the stock before that because I know $2 is the resistance pre-market, and it's the resistance psychologically, which is the $2 mark. So if we can get a strong break through that, I would be more than happy to play it. And lastly, CLSN has been in a downward wedge pattern for quite some time. Their short float is 17%. CLSN is one we could see a nice pop due to a short squeeze if it continues upward today, and its float altogether is 3 million. So we have a 3 million share float, which is a very, very low float. We could see CLSN move very quickly, and there's a short float of 17%, so there's the possibility of a short squeeze if we continue upwards, or we'll see a nice pop today. Okay. Now, there's 5 minutes till the market opens. We can go ahead and take a look at one more stock here, I believe, before we get going here. Okay, so OXGI has been on the radar all morning. I wasn't a super big fan of it to begin with. So CRMD is another one that is popping up on the pre-market scan. Okay, so CRMD looks like the most recent news was this morning at 9:19. They filed files 8K and some other events. How good of news is it? Not the best news, but it is gapping up. But it is gapping up on low volume, it appears. So yes, there is not a ton of volume. I mean, there's volume. It looks like above, 50,000 for sure. Now, the 5-minute chart on this actually looks pretty good, to be honest. So watch CRMD. CRMD could be one that we see a gap and go right out of the gates just because it's still holding its highs and hasn't seen any red, really. Oh, there it goes. Never mind. Unless it changes, of course. So CRMD has a float of 58 million and a short float of almost 6%. So this isn't one we're going to see move very quickly because it has such a big float that I'm personally not even very interested in it. So CRMD, not on my radar anymore. Not very stoked about it. All right, so that's what I have for this morning as far as the pre-market movers go. There's a few other ones on the list, but we only have about 3 minutes till the market opens, so I want everybody to get ready for the stocks they would want to watch. So remember, we have DRYS that has a super low float, super high short float interest. If it continues up today, for whatever reason, we could see a nice short squeeze. MTBC has earnings coming out tomorrow, and they had a huge run yesterday. So the possibility to see continuation on MTBC is very strong today. RAD just broke out from some of its moving averages, and it just broke out from a not broke out from a downward wedge, but it's seen a double bottom. So there's a chance we could continue to see RAD run today. And then as far for our pre-market movers go, we just kind of went over them. We have CLSN that was going up on news. We had RWLK, but RWLK had a 5-cent spread, wasn't too stoked about it. Then we have CRMD that is a huge float. So for me, I would personally watch CLSN. And then, of course, we just watch our mover scanner all day long to see if we can't find some other momentum plays throughout the day. All right, so we got 2 minutes till the market opens. So we're going to go ahead and just get our orders ready to go in. So Ross, CLSN looks good to me this morning. Nice gap up. So yeah, for example, Ross knows what he's talking about here. Ross is saying the fact that CLSN is gapping up and it had good news. So personally, Ross is on track. The nice, good shout out there. I like that. So Ross knows what he's talking about here. We have gap up on CLSN. So I'm going to go ahead and get my screen ready for potential plays and what stocks I'm going to be watching at. But I'm definitely looking at CLSN. CLSN is holding a nice support right on the 50-day moving average, or right on the volume weighted average price right now at about $1.90. So I would like to see this thing break above $2. All right. So that covers it for the morning pre-market watch list recap.